Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the upcoming webinar with COBRA. In meetings with these guys, it's certainly, I think, a very useful initiative to acquaint the SATSA members with. You know, as many people will know, we try and steer clear of airy-fairy theoretical initiatives, but this COBRA thing, I think, has real substance and legs. But it comes to us, and the reason we're doing it today, it comes to us in, you know, times that are getting beyond dark. You know, this is white knuckle time. So Alex Ferguson described it as squeaky bum time. And businesses are really going into a particularly acute phase where the prospect of turning taps on is just becoming further and further away. So what the COBRA initiative is, in my humble understanding, and they're going to be telling you a lot more about this afternoon, is essentially a core conduit that links distressed businesses with an array of partner business organizations that they have that can actually assist the distressed businesses. So this is going to take various forms, and I think what the good thing is, I understand it, is they are incredibly willing to listen to our members, to try and understand where the pain and pressure points are, and they have a variety of well-established resources. So those are existing businesses as well as legal resources and the like that they are able then to bring to bear and to connect to the distressed business in question. So I think everybody this afternoon, I think you're going to find this particularly useful. I would urge you to please engage directly with them. It's always good that we get questions in the column, and SATSA members are really disciplined in that regard. But, you know, they're inviting a conversation. And if anybody feels vulnerable enough to actually just ask the question of your own business and put it out there, it's incredibly useful, because that gives us a sort of a straw dog, a bit of a case study, and they can explain how they could possibly assist you. So it's not something I would say enjoy the webinar, but certainly please find it of value. It's the work that we are trying to do at the moment is to see how we can add practical value to our members in these dark times. So yeah, good luck, guys, and I hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to kick it off. Hello and welcome everyone to the SATSA webinar with COBRA. I discovered today for the first time that COBRA exists, and it is an ecosystem of providing shared value. So I'm looking forward to hearing exactly what that means for us in the tourism and hospitality industry. This is an important webinar for our sector because COBRA specializes in connecting distressed businesses with specialists who can assist. And we all know right now how much our industry needs that. So joining me to unpack that today is Bob Greer, who's the COO of COBRA. And he's joined by a panel which I'll allow him to introduce in just a minute. You guys know the drill. You've been on tons of webinars with me before. The chat is open and I can see some of you are already using it. So please feel free to converse within the chat amongst each other and with us. But if you do have a question, would welcome that question in the Q&A folder at the bottom of the screen. So questions in the Q&A folder for me, please, and anything you'd like to discuss as a community can go into the chat. And then once we have run through the presentations and the discussions, we'll go to your questions. I am recording the webinar and we will release it in the coming days. So you will have access to that as well if you'd like to watch it again, or perhaps share it with some of your colleagues in the industry. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Bob, who'll take you through his presentation. Bob, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Natalia, and thank you for hosting COBRA. I'm joined today by Ian Fleming, who is the CEO of Engaged Business Turnaround, who's one of the founding partners of COBRA. Peter Gordon, who's one of the directors at Engaged Business Turnaround, and Maurice Crespi, who is a managing partner at Schindler's Attorneys, who are also one of the founding members of COBRA. I am the CEO of COBRA. I am also a management consultant at IQ Business, and IQ Business is the third founding member of COBRA. So in order to give you a sense of what COBRA is all about, I'm going to share a very brief presentation, just giving an overview of COBRA and how it kind of works, and then after that, I think we'll get into a detailed discussion with Ian, Peter, and Maurice in terms of some of the more intricate details in terms of how COBRA might be able to assist you. And as any questions come up, as Natalia has suggested, we just pop those in the Q&A channel, and we will address them when we get a moment to. So I am going to pop something up on the screen. Natalia, can you see my screen? Is this?
I can indeed. You're fine.
Great. Right. So as I said earlier, it's just an introduction and overview of the COBRA initiative. Why is my mouse not clicking? There we go. So I'm going to explain the COBRA ecosystem, give you a sense of what our imperative is, how COBRA can assist, what our objectives are, explain a little bit about shared and gifted value, show you a little bit of the insights and knowledge hub that we've created, and tell you about how you can contact COBRA. COBRA was initiated, I said earlier, by Engaged Business Turnaround, Schindler's Attorneys, and IQ Business. It was initiated by Ian, Maurice, and Adam Kraker, who is the CEO of IQ Business, 2 days after the declaration of the state of emergency relating to the COVID pandemic. We very quickly scaled up and started building an ecosystem of partners who are willing and able to assist businesses. So at this point in time, we have about 80 partner organizations who have committed to assisting distressed businesses through whatever means they have available to them. We are very aware of the fact that we have a health crisis going on, but obviously what has occurred is this fairly devastating economic crisis that has come along with it, and is obviously going to perpetuate probably longer than the health crisis. We are all experts, I think, these days there we go, my mouse is not working. In the imperative of our time, which is, saving lives versus saving livelihoods. And from a COBRA perspective, we are very much in the saving livelihoods side of the fence. That is absolutely what our intent and our purpose is. So how does COBRA actually assist? On the right-hand side, you can see business in distress, probably your business or someone you know. And generally what we're seeing is business getting into trouble from a financial, legal, operational perspective. And so what COBRA does is it connects the distressed business to our network of partners. And through that network of partners, we provide support, information, or advice to organizations. If required, we will also engage in an informal business turnaround process or a formal business rescue process and assist and guide through that. And if things are as dire as they certainly seem to be in some sectors, we will get involved and help manage insolvency and liquidation processes. Our three primary objectives is to coordinate with businesses in distress and leverage our relationships so that we're able to try to see what we can do to support the business without it needing to go into business rescue. However, we're very clear on the fact that business rescue is a very valuable tool in the armory of assisting distressed businesses, and something that is much maligned in our country. And this is one of the objectives of COBRA, is to change the perception and the practice of business rescue, because it is not being used appropriately and not being used effectively. And that's something that we are very passionate about changing. And Ian and Peter will talk a little bit more about that in the coming minutes. And then really the last part of what we're trying to do is engaging with external stakeholders. We've been working with BUSA, we've been working with Business for South Africa, working with the DTI, and really getting involved in engaging with government and being able to make a difference in the external ecosystem within which businesses operate. So I mentioned shared value, and shared value is a strategy where ultimately the private sector combines and comes together in order to assist with social issues such as people losing jobs or businesses going out of business. And really that is kind of one of the most fundamental elements of COBRA is this idea of shared value. I mean, COBRA is certainly not a charity, but COBRA absolutely is here to assist our economy. We believe that doing good is good for business, and what we want is to advise and assist businesses so that we are able to make the operating ecosystem sustainable for everyone and into the future. We also have a commitment called gifted value. Gifted value is where an organization is 100% beyond its means to assist itself, but assistance could be provided. That business may request to enter into COBRA's gifted value ecosystem, in which case our partners will discount or even write off their fees completely, depending on the situation and depending on the actual context that they find themselves in. We have built an insights dashboard. The URL is over here. If you go to the COBRA website, you're going to have a look at it. And really what we're trying to create is a space that people can come to understand what is happening in the economy, what is happening in terms of organizations reaching out to COBRA, and really give people a dashboard, an overview, and insight in terms of the economic tsunami as it unfolds. I think unsurprisingly, if you have a look at the businesses in distress in terms of the sectors, I think hospitality, tourism, and transport all kind of fall into your ambit. And unsurprisingly, I think we see they are quite high up on our list of folk who are reaching out in this state of distress. We've also created a freely accessible knowledge hub with a lot of very valuable information and advice and guidelines, which is freely accessible via our website or via the URL on the screen. And anyone is able to go in there and have a look around and see what you can find that might be able to assist. In order to contact COBRA, you can go to our website, which is cobra.org.za, and we have a speak to an expert button or apply for funding button. And if you click on those buttons, you'll be redirected to a form that you can fill in. And once you fill that form in, it'll create a ticket in our service desk system, and we will then connect you with the appropriate partner to assist you, given what your primary needs and requirements are. And that's the very brief overview of COBRA. I didn't want to bore you with too much detail. I think the real value is going to be in the conversation with Ian, Maurice, and Peter, and really looking at their areas of expertise. So that is that from me.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I encourage, and I'd want everybody, please ask questions, because we want this to be dynamic, and we want to really address issues that are specific to your business. COBRA is about that. So just to give you an idea about what we can do, COBRA has a team of mediators, we have a team of advisors, we have a team of attorneys, and the attorneys are there on a gifted value basis. So if you guys need, let's say, legal advice, and you are unable to afford the legal advice, you can reach out and you'll have attorneys such as Schindler's Attorneys assisting you. COBRA assists in the business rescue process. Ian will deal with that. We'll take you through that. And the questions around that, please ask questions around business rescue. So maybe I should just jump in there just to give a brief overview of business rescue, just to get the thoughts going. Business rescue is it's provided for in our Companies Act, Section 128 of the Companies Act. And the idea with business rescue is to give a business a temporary reprieve when it comes to paying out monies, paying out claims. So if somebody were to sue a company in business rescue, COBRA would be able to place the company sue the company for a debt. COBRA would be able to place the company immediately in business rescue, and immediately the likes of Ian or the mediators would begin negotiating. It goes without saying, I mean, you can't suck blood from stone. So what we're finding is that the counterparties to agreements have been very, very forgiving in most instances. But let me hand over to Ian. He'll do an introduction and also give us some insight into some business rescues. What's happening on the ground, Ian? You're on mute, Ian.
Sorry about that. I don't do that very often, but it does happen from time to time. Thanks, Maurice. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome to everybody out there. We certainly we know what you're going through at the moment, and we certainly commiserate with you. It's a very, very difficult trading environment, especially for the people in your industry. And yeah, but that's what COBRA is there to help with. We're dealing with we're obviously extremely busy at the moment. COBRA is a multidisciplinary turnaround practice, and we do, as Bob and Maurice explained, we do a lot of our work under business rescue. But we try to avoid business rescue as far as possible. We only use business rescue where the legal moratorium is required. In other words, where the company needs protection from creditors who are either trying to liquidate the company or attach assets or whatever the case may be. So yes, it is definitely very, very difficult out there at the moment for everybody, for people in most industries. I'll ask Peter just to jump in to cover anything that I might miss. But as far as business rescue goes, as Maurice explained, it gives the company, we like to call it the steel jacket, against creditors taking legal action against the company. The Companies Act aims to conclude business rescues as quickly as possible. The company talks about a 3-month period. Unfortunately, that's not really practical in most cases. Our thinking is that if anything has to change about the Companies Act in Chapter 6 that deals with business rescue, it's the 3-month period, because it normally takes much longer to turn a company around and to get it back on track. There's numerous things that can cause financial distress. Obviously, at the moment, it's quite obvious what's caused financial distress in your industry. But we find we do a lot of business rescues at any one time. We've got a large team that deals with them, and we find common themes that are prevalent that cause a company to be in financial distress. So sometimes it's one theme, sometimes it's various themes that need to be addressed in order to fix the company, and therefore and a large skill set is required in order to get it right. I think one of the reasons why business rescue has got a very bad reputation in South Africa is because a lot of the companies and the practitioners out there who are doing it are not adequately skilled to be doing it properly. I often rattle off all the skills that we believe are required to do turnaround and business rescue properly, and it's a very large skill set, ranging from leadership skills to entrepreneurial skills, strategic skills, financial, operational, legal skills, corporate finance skills, communication skills, psychology skills. The list goes on and on and on. And in COBRA we have we've got all those skills within our team at our fingertips, and it's very important to be able to deploy those skills on a very rapid basis, because we've all heard about business rescues that drag on and on and on. And there's some very prominent ones in the press at the moment that just seem to be going on much longer than they should. And as they drag on and on and on, the company's just running out of money. So it's incredibly important to be able to mobilize resources quickly and effectively in order to sort out the problem at hand. Peter, perhaps I can hand over to you, and you can just tell us a little bit more about business rescue. You're normally quite good at describing what exactly business rescue is.
Yeah, with pleasure. And Hanali, yes, good point about every time somebody says I'm on mute. You would get around, you'd probably get more than you're getting in the industry at the moment from selling services. A few things that I must just highlight here, and Ian said it. We don't believe that business rescue is the answer to every problem when a company is financially distressed. Bearing in mind that if a company is financially distressed, then that's defined in the Companies Act as being that you're unable to pay your obligations as and when they fall due in the next 6 months. The Companies Act generally has an obligation that the directors at any one time have to do that test to make sure you can pay people over 12 months. But Business Rescue Chapter 6 shortened that to 6 months. So if you are in that position and we're talking, just to underline this, Business Rescue applies to companies and CCs. It doesn't apply to sole traders and partnerships. So the important point there. But if we are talking business rescue and the company is financially distressed, then the directors are obligated to either put the business into business rescue, or if they decide not to, and to decide to go into business rescue, you need more than 50% of the directors voting positively. But if for whatever reason the directors decide not to go into business rescue, then they've got to come up with an alternative plan, firstly. And then secondly, rather bizarrely in the Companies Act, it calls for the company to advise all your suppliers and staff that whilst you're financially distressed at the moment, as defined, you've decided not to go into business rescue. Well, I'm afraid that just to me is a bit of a trigger for anybody that's feeling a little bit nervous about the company to suddenly rush to the courts to apply for the liquidation. The backstop there, of course, is, as Marie said earlier, to draw blood out of a stone is impossible. So there's a lot of people holding back from going to court for recovery of debt because people are in such a parlous state. But the absolute positive point of business rescue, as Ian said, it provides you with 100% moratorium. So somebody, there's an injury claim against the company because somebody fell over in the hotel and is now suing the company. They cannot take action against the company unless the business rescue practitioners agree that they can do so. So no court action can be taken for any claim against the company whilst it's in business rescue. Obviously, any claims that are pending will remain. And when the company comes out of business rescue, if it is an injury claim, that might be pursued in the company's shot of its business rescue epitaph. A few pointers. The cost, it tends to be, and I say tends because Ian's covered the thing how sometimes these things are dragged out for a very long time. It tends to be cheaper than a liquidation if the assets in the company, because remember, a liquidator just takes 10% of all assets, 3% of fixed property, 8% of cash. So any assets, he works on a percentage. But in business rescue, the laid down rates by the government, those were laid down in 2008. So they're way off the market at the moment. But the business rescue practitioners are allowed to negotiate a contingency fee or a different rate with, an important point, with the creditors. They need to get creditor approval because the creditors are going to approve the plan that's put forward by the business rescue practitioners. Now, to get a plan drafted and approved requires 75% of creditors to vote positively in favor of the plan. And that's 75% of those by value of whatever they owed, of those that took the time out to attend what we call a Section 151 meeting. You have to attend by person or by proxy. If somebody fails to turn up and they get 5% of those in attendance, it has absolute certainty. It's extremely easy to put into place. It requires a director's resolution and a filing.
Peter, we're battling with your reception a little bit.
Yeah, I suggest you put your video off, Peter. Let's see if that works a bit better. If you can hear us.
Maurice, you're on mute.
Yeah. I'll just jump in and carry on. So a company is placed in business rescue, can be placed in business rescue by way of a resolution.
Affidavits and various forms at SATSA. Okay. So
I'll take over for you, Peter. I'm going to mute you for now until you resolve your issues. So a business goes into rescue one of two ways, either by way of a resolution or by way of a court application. The resolution is very simple. It's a director's resolution. If the company is financially distressed, you're obliged to put it to a vote. You're obliged to get the directors to resolve one way or another. And if the directors resolve not to put the company into business rescue, then the company is obliged, the directors are obliged to send a notice to employees and to creditors explaining why, in the circumstances, the company was not put into rescue. The directors didn't put the company in rescue. And an obvious answer to that is, well, I've gone to COBRA. I'm in the COBRA ecosystem, so I'm not going to go into rescue because COBRA are there to prevent a rescue if possible. I see there's a question here. What is the minimum size of a company going to rescue? There is no minimum. In fact, COBRA has intentionally geared itself to deal with all types of businesses from a spaza shop level up. We have the author Gigi Alcock, who's handling that sector, all the way up to big business. We pride ourselves in assisting the small guy. In fact, it's the small guy who in my mind, really needs our assistance, because it's the small guy who can't afford the attorneys, who doesn't have somebody to negotiate with the bank. So we are there for absolutely every business, and probably the smaller businesses need us more than the bigger businesses because of the fact that access to professional services is really a killer. So any business size, please reach out. You can join COBRA on the website, and we'll gladly assist you. And you'll see on the website, if you have a legal issue, a legal question, and I see there is one on, you can ask to meet with attorneys, a whole team of attorneys if need be. If you want attorneys to meet with your staff, to a Q&A or with your team, we'll do that. There's a question here, which is a good question. I mean, what does one do if you've paid a company 50,000 rands as a prepayment and the company goes into liquidation? And in this case, it's a voluntary liquidation. What one can do is one has to determine who the liquidator who's appointed is. You contact the liquidator. The liquidator is appointed by the master of the High Court. Again, if you want us to find out or do a search as to who the liquidator is, you join COBRA. It'll go through the legal stream, and then we'll have a team looking out for the liquidator, making inquiries with the master. Then what happens is you fill out claim forms, and you lay claim to the money, the 50,000 rands in your case, and the liquidator will pay it out in order of preference. So if they're secured creditors, and if they have a mortgage over property, they get paid first. Then you get preference creditors. If they're notarial bonds, they get preference. And then you get a concurrent creditor. And chances are you'll be a concurrent creditor, so you'll be last in line to get paid. What I strongly suggest is that you do go get some advice, because there's certain circumstances where it's not worth your while to, in fact, claim. And that is where there's what's known as a risk of a contribution. You may, in fact, by claiming, have to pay more. So this is a classic case of, it sounds like a straightforward question, and you think it's a straightforward answer, but it's not. And that's why COBRA exists, to actually assist you to maneuver through the regulatory framework. See, there's another. What legal consequences would there be if a company fails to advise creditors and staff about being in distress? I worry that many businesses have another entity owing money. Sorry, it went down. What would the legal consequences be? The legal consequences are the directors personally expose themselves to a potential liability. So in terms of the Companies Act, the directors have certain duties, and the statutory duties and common law duties. And if the directors do not follow those duties, creditors after the fact are going to come along and they're going to interrogate why it was that the company wasn't put into rescue. And if the creditors can demonstrate that the board ought to have put it in rescue but failed to do so, and were negligent in doing so, or reckless in doing so, and the creditors have suffered as a consequence, the directors could conceivably be held personally liable. So very, very important and good question. How long is the liquidation process? A liquidation process can take years. It generally doesn't take several months, but it depends what's involved. If there's litigation involved, the liquidation process has to actually wait for the litigation to come to an end. So it could be years. If it's a simple liquidation, it should be several months, but again, it depends on the assets and the time it takes to realize those assets. It'd be on the period of business rescue, maybe Ian, it says, what is the maximum period of the business rescue? But I think Peter and Ian, it would be good if you actually give us some examples of how long it's taken. I mean, I've been involved in a business rescue that's actually taken a matter of days. We had a plan ready, we put it into rescue, adopted the plan and pulled it out. So it can take various days, but over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Maurice. Yes, the business rescue, there is no maximum period. Sometimes it carries on. You know, we've had some business rescues that have gone on for 4 years, for example, and obviously that's not ideal. Obviously, creditors don't like that very much, and it only really happens where there's events that prolong it. For example, you know, when there's litigation involved, and we all know how long litigation can take. So, you know, we do try to avoid litigation as much as possible in business rescues. However, it's not always possible. You know, sometimes we deal with very aggressive parties, and and sometimes we need to litigate. Apart from having aggressive parties involved, sometimes we need to litigate in order to unlock value as part of the business rescue plan. So, if creditors feel that a business rescue is dragging on for too long, and it's not justifiable that it's dragging on for so long, then they might go to court to have the business rescue process ended and put into liquidation normally. But there is no maximum period. I was kind of anticipating that question because I was speaking to Natalia just beforehand and asking her when, you know, you expect the tourism industry to start picking up again, and she talked about, you know, sort of early 2022. For it to start picking up again, which is probably about a year away. And, you know, it's very conceivable that you could put a company into business rescue, or you could put your company into business rescue, and we could, the business rescue plan could essentially say the fundamentals of the business rescue plan would be that, you know, we're waiting for COVID, the effects of COVID to pass over, so that in February 2022, we can start operating again and making a profit. So that is a possibility. You know, if you have creditors that are really banging your door down and really threatening, then business rescue is most definitely an option. When it comes to especially your smaller businesses, your smaller tourism businesses, you'll find that it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to negotiate with landlords and so on, because the landlord doesn't take you that seriously because you're not one of his big tenants. You know, the big tenants generally have a lot sort of more stronger standing with landlords and better ability to negotiate, therefore. Whereas if you're a small tenant, you might just get kind of overlooked, and the landlord might just carry on sending you threatening letters. In which case, business rescue could be a very viable option if the landlord's not prepared to be reasonable in your opinion and just sit down with you at the table and negotiate constructively. Peter, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've said.
Yeah, maybe also, Peter, just with reference to SAA, it always comes up, you know, why is it taking so long, and why have employees or creditors not converted it to a liquidation?
Well, look, the liquidation is something to consider quite carefully, because if the business rescue practitioner decides that the company really cannot be rescued, then he's obligated to put it into liquidation. However, I would argue that with where we are with COVID, there's no reason for the directors not to believe that the company can be profitable in the future. It's just that there's an impediment to doing business, which is the restrictions brought about by the pandemic. So there's no problem with the directors saying, you know, without a pandemic, we would be doing well. And therefore, we do believe this can go into rescue. And as Ian says, it can almost be put into rescue, as almost put it into a state of a coma. Sorry about the analogy with people that do have the virus, but you're putting the business into a coma until the thing has been cured. And that's quite feasible. As I was saying when I broke up there on the reception, the most powerful thing is the protection, absolute protection. There is, however, what we call a Section 155 rescue process. It doesn't involve the amount of protection, but it does call upon, and it's a legal process, Section 155 of the Companies Act. And what the company does is it negotiates with classes of creditors, or all the creditors, if they all only have one class. And you need 75% once again of the creditors voting to vote positively. And that is for an agreement. So you say, guys, we can't pay you now. We're going to treat you all in the same bucket, and we can pay you, you know, X% per month for the next 24 months or whatever that agreement is. And in order to make it binding on creditors, you have to go to court to make it an order of court. Failure to do that means that any creditor can just bail out of the agreement and say, you know, I'm not partaking. There's also a risk of the creditors at the beginning of the negotiation process to say, I'm not prepared to negotiate. Whereas in business rescue, they have no option. You're already protected, so you don't need their consent for your protection. Outside of the law, obviously, there's still the informal process. You've got one or two large creditors. They might be deposits that you've taken in for future services to be delivered. You can negotiate with your customers to extend those until you believe you'll be out of rescue. I'm sure a lot of the, well, not I'm sure, I know a lot of the travel industry is doing that at the moment, is deferring the delivery of the service, whatever that might be. If you've paid deposits and somebody had the question with service providers and you can't get your money back, then you're probably going to have to negotiate with them for deferring when that service will be used. So it is very much, I mean, Ian and I often say that once you trigger this process, obviously rescue on the side that it gives you full protection, informal on the side that you're still opening yourself up to legal challenge, but every way in between, it is the start of negotiations, and all these things do take negotiations. And as Ian rightly says, sometimes those end up in litigation, while it takes a lot longer than it should do. But strictly speaking, the rescue should be over in 3 months in terms of the Act. Any extension of that requires a simple majority of the creditors to agree to an extension of time, and needs must. So very often one is forced into that. The other important thing that I think is that we often say is communication in this scenario is critical. That doesn't mean you're disclosing everything to every creditor, but if you're not able to play, it is, especially with the banks. If the banks haven't heard from you and they see that repayments on loans or any, your finance lease on your motor vehicle or whatever is not being paid, they assume the worst. And at least if you're in discussions with them, there were the concessions given by all the banks right at the beginning of COVID on payment delays in their loan agreements. But that still means that it doesn't mean that they're not still open to some sort of, they're going to play hardball because they want their money. They're suffering not as much as the smaller businesses, but they are suffering. So they're going to try and get their money which way. And they are open, however, to negotiations, but communication is critical. Yeah, I think those are a few of the...
There's a question about sole proprietors and partnerships and what does COBRA do with them. We take on any business, so we don't have the business rescue legislation available to us when it comes to sole proprietorships and partnerships, but that's where the negotiation comes in. That's the same process takes place. You just don't have the moratorium. You're not armed with the moratorium. I also see that there's another question to clarify on when is it feasible to claim from a company in liquidation. So what I was referring to when I say it's not necessarily worthwhile is if there isn't enough money in the company, so the assets don't realize enough money in the company to cover the liquidator's minimum statutory fee, then what happens is all the creditors who claimed have to actually pay in. So it's actually dangerous to claim. So what you do is if you claim from a company in liquidation, you must always say, I'm doing so subject to there being no risk of me having to contribute. And if you do that, then you're safe. So you need to engage. And that's why I said, that's why COBRA can assist in speaking to the liquidator to ensure that that risk isn't there. There's another question here, is COBRA here only for advice on business rescue? It's a big no there. We're here to help and in giving advice, legal advice, in any which way can assist. And that includes, for instance, if you come to COBRA and somebody does owe you money, obviously the way in which we can assist is in getting that money paid to you. So it's not only advice, we'll take steps to actually recover the money. And the way we do that is we try and get the counterparty to come into the COBRA ecosystem themselves. And once they're in, there's a knock on, and then we deal with their creditors, and we in turn deal with their creditors. So that's how we achieve that. But any legal advice, labor, commercial, contract, even personal. I mean, we mustn't ignore the fact that shareholders and directors are individuals, and they're going through a personal crisis, they're going through stress. We have wellness professionals in COBRA who can actually also assist employees, shareholders, directors. So there is no limit to the manner in which we can assist.
Yeah, Maurice, I think it's also important there to say that, you know, we're giving advice now on business rescue, but remember, business rescue in itself is not about giving advice. Business rescue is getting in there and helping you run the business under the protection. So, you know, within Engage, there's about 15 of us, and that's all we do is business turnarounds. More than 50% of us are registered business rescue practitioners, but that's not the main focus. But if a company is in business rescue, we have an operations guy who will take over, looking at the operations, working with the management of the company, directors and shareholders if need be, to find the best way of turning this business into a sustainable entity again, so that, remember, we can't hand back an insolvent company or financially distressed company to the owners. We have to hand back a company that's financially viable. Now, how the main way that's done is through a compromise with the creditors. So we agree with the creditors that, you know, there's not enough money in the pot to pay them the 100 cents in the rand, and we agree it can be as low as 10 cents. We've done some at 10 cents in the rand. The main focus there is that we have to ensure that we're better off in business rescue than the creditors would have been in liquidation. Not normally a hard bar to beat, because liquidation valuations, certainly for the unsecured creditors, tend to be horrendous. So as long as we beat that, we've now compromised with the creditors. These immediately, because you don't have to pay those creditors, immediately some cash in the system. Somebody asked how this whole process is funded, and that is how. There's money released. If it's a large rescue, we will look to raising what we call post-commencement finance, and that's funding from a third party or a shareholder or director. The important thing there is that if you as a shareholder or director of a company are thinking of putting money into the business, please don't do so before you go into rescue. Because if you do so before rescue and then, heaven forbid, the company goes into liquidation, you've got a good chance of losing everything. If you wait until it's in rescue and put it in, you're then treated as a preferred creditor. And indeed, the practitioner, if there are some assets available, can use those assets to secure that loan that you've made into the company. So thereby improving your position, but giving the company sufficient funding to go forward. But, you know, we've had cases, desperate cases, where people have gone and taken a second mortgage on their home and then invested in the company and then gone into rescue. And it's not the cleverest thing to do. But it's not about advice. This is about on the ground, roll up sleeves, negotiate with staff, do a Section 189 reduction with you if needs be, negotiate with suppliers, negotiate with customers if they're sitting with deposits, you're sitting with their cash at deposits, etc. So it's very much somebody asked the question, can a business operate under business rescue? That's the whole raison d'etre of business rescue, is to keep the business operating as best we can under these COVID situations.
There's a question here that whilst you're on, what would you recommend for businesses? What would they do? What would they do right now, seeing that we potentially still have many months of no income? What financial planning should they look at? Decreasing fixed and variable costs, retrenching of staff? What can UIF assist with?
Well, look, I think that's what Ian was alluding to as well. Business rescue gives you the opportunity, and I said it myself, to go into a sort of sleep state. You know, we believe this business can be rescued. First point. Second point, we need time because of the pandemic and the lockdown. And during that time, we can't pay anybody. Now, anybody that's continuing to work for you, or any costs that you're incurring after it's gone into rescue, have to be paid as preferential. So, you know, then it's a matter of negotiating with staff to lay them off, a bit like they're doing in the UK with the furlough. It's talking to your landlord and saying, look, we can't pay you. We'll either vacate if you can find somebody else to take over the premises, or we will try our damnedest to pay services, so electricity and heat and light, but we can't pay the rent. We have had situations where landlords have agreed to take zero rent for sort of periods, a number in the restaurant trade, where they've taken you know, a holiday of 6 months. We did one of 12 months where the landlord was prepared to continue with the business as long as they continued paying his heat and light, and that was fair enough. The company was using that in the premises. So one's got to be, there's no one size fits all. It is a matter of looking at each individual situation and negotiating with people. But if layoffs have to happen, well, then they have to happen. Just remember, with a layoff, you've got redundancy payments to make. So that can be quite expensive. A lot of companies at the beginning of COVID started saying to staff they needed to take their leave instead of being paid. Well, that's instead of working. And that, of course, is a double-edged sword, because you're getting rid of the leave accrual, but an accrual is not cash. You're still having to pay on a monthly basis. It was far better off for companies to ask staff to take a 20, 30, 40, 50% reduction or whatever it might be, go on to reduced working hours, reduced time, because as much as the owners of the business are trying to survive, so the staff are trying to survive, and just indicating to them that, you know, you're not going to prevent them if they want to go out there and find another job. But most people, in our experience, most employees have worked with us in taking reductions with some potential upside if the business gets saved. You're on mute.
Yeah, I think most employees understand as well as everybody else that if they're not going to take a cut, then the company's going to end up liquidating anyway, and the staff will get much less in a liquidation scenario than they would get not in a liquidation scenario, whether it's a business rescue or otherwise. Sorry, Maurice, I saw one question about retrenchment costs and how a staff dealt with in business rescue versus not in business rescue. And the simple answer is that business rescue doesn't afford any different treatment of staff than the Labour Relations Act normally does. So business rescue doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to pay staff less, or or whatever the case may be. However, when it comes to retrenchment costs, in business rescues, we have sometimes a retrenchment process takes place, and then there simply is no money to pay the staff, until trading picks up or until an asset is sold, whatever the case may be. So the practicality of it is that under business rescue, the payment of retrenchment costs can be delayed. As Maurice pointed out, we have to prioritize staff costs, but if there's simply no cash, then the payment of retrenchment costs can be delayed, and we have delayed it in the past by sort of 6, 7, 8 months. But eventually paid them out, because it does have to be a priority.
Thanks. I see there's a comment that this is something that the industry would benefit from, certainly. Cost implications. So the way COBRA works is, as is the case with most companies that come through COBRA, there's barely a pulse. And where there's barely a pulse, there are no service fees, there are no costs. The idea is we help out on a gifted value basis. But then you have scenarios where you have businesses who have a high NAV, but they're just hitting a cash flow crunch. So they have the money, but they need assistance through the process, and they will one day be able to pay, and those clients pay the rates. And then there's the in-between, where the rates are discounted by the partners to make it affordable. The idea is there can be no liquidation, and COBRA is there to make sure there's no liquidation. And obviously, fees would be one hell of an impediment to a rescue. So we like to ignore the fees when it comes to rescuing the business. And the majority of advice, in fact, I'd say 99.9% of my attendances over the last year have been for free on a gifted value basis.
Peter spoke earlier about there's no one size fits all when it comes to how we deal with each company's business rescue, and the costs aspect is exactly the same. The simple COBRA philosophy is that every company who we deal with in business rescue or otherwise has to be better off as a result of our interventions, as a result of us getting involved. So we have done business rescues where the monthly fee we'll typically calculate a monthly fixed fee that is affordable for the company, and then potentially a contingency fee at the end based on genuine turnaround success. But the monthly fee that we've used in the past for some small companies has been as low as 5,000 Rand a month. And for larger companies, it's been as high as 2 million Rand a month. So there absolutely is no one size fits all. It simply comes down to what can the company afford, and us making sure that the company is better off as a result of our involvement.
Just to be clear, that's it. That's the rescue process. COBRA is a lot more than that. Okay, so when it comes to legal advice, when it comes to us holding your hand, when it comes to dealing with your staff, or let's say just negotiating with your landlord, that's the gifted value. I mean, I will sit down and meet with your team and answer whatever questions you have at a gifted value basis. There are no fees for that. It's only when it comes to the process that the guys will start looking at the fees, and they look at your income turnover and the probabilities of success in determining that.
I see a question about funding. So something that's important to know is that COBRA does have a number of funding partners. We have also partnered with an organization called SME Go, who are a platform that enables a business person to put in credentials once, and what that will then do is create application forms for multiple funds that are available. They are currently in discussion with CIFA to see what they can do around taking over the processing of CIFA funding applications. So if funding is a primary need, you're welcome to reach out to COBRA. We will put you in touch with our funding partners, as well as through the SME Go channel and their funding partners. And that's a constantly evolving space. We're very aware of the fact that funding is access to funding is a huge limitation for a lot of businesses. Obviously, part of the challenge is that, you know, unsecured is not really something that that we can help with very much, unless it is in the grant space, which might come out of SME Go. But you know, if there's any form of security, our funding partners are very happy to get involved and engage with people coming through COBRA. So I just wanted to let everyone know that, you know, I think as Maurice said, you know, COBRA really does have very many moving parts to it, and so the business rescue component, the legal component, the funding component, we really are trying to see what we can do and bring partners on board that are able to assist businesses in many different areas, and where businesses in distress typically need assistance.
Henry said, where do we get more info on funding? That'll be on the website, on the COBRA website. There's a hell of a lot of information there. So you'll see there's actually a portal that you can go through for the purposes of funding. What happens to if a business goes into liquidation? What happens to staff salaries? There's an amount that gets gazetted where staff are entitled, they have preference to, I stand to be corrected, last I looked it was it wasn't that much, it was about 140,000. You get preference to that amount, so you get first bite at the cherry when it comes to that, together with your secured creditors. You will be regarded as a secured creditor, but any amount owing to you over and above the prescribed amount, you'll become a concurrent creditor and you'll be in the queue. Would business rescue be useful for my debt on the bank overdraft and business credit card that I'm now unable to service due to the lack of income over the last year? If it's personal, it's your personal credit card, obviously business rescue cannot assist. The legislation won't assist. But what COBRA does have, we have a team of mediators. So we can assist you personally if you're in that position by getting a mediator to speak to the bank and to try and negotiate a payment arrangement on your behalf. And what's nice about having the mediator is the bank trusts the mediator. You know, the mediator is seen as an impartial person, and the bank will take the mediator more seriously. So you can give COBRA a shot and just trying to negotiate something there if it's for you personally. If it's for you as a sole proprietor in your business, the same applies. But over there, what COBRA will do is also try and rescue your business.
Just remember, any obligation or contract under business rescue can be suspended by the business rescue practitioner. So any sort of repayments, bank repayments and so on that's coming off your bank statement in your business on a monthly basis, be it credit card repayments or loan repayments and so on, can be suspended by the business rescue practitioner. And that can carry on for 6 months or 8 months. The business rescue practitioner will typically suspend those obligations the moment it goes into business rescue. He'll often suspend lease obligations as well, thus ensuring that they don't need to be paid immediately. However, lease commitments do need to be honored in the long run. But business rescue is a very useful tool for short-term, boost your short-term cash resources, because as I said, if there's bank repayments on those can be suspended for 6 months or 9 months, as the case may be, which is then built into the business rescue plan, and to help give the company breathing space while the business rescue practitioner reorganizes and restructures the affairs of the company.
We have a great question, and that's, does COBRA services also include marketing strategies, alternatives, and cost-cutting ways to advertise, promote these affected businesses as part of the turnaround plan? Or is it just financial or legal assistance? It's very much about looking at your business and looking at ways as to how to pivot your business by way of example. Now, let me give you an example. I mean, there was a successful restaurant chain that went into COBRA, and these engaged guys went so far as to redo the menus. I mean, they literally micromanaged the process, and by redoing the menus, and they also did some deals with, I think it was Uber Eats, and they made a plan there, they successfully rescued the business. So it's actually very much the legal advice and that kind of stuff. That's the legal framework. But what's important in rescuing a business is, in fact, getting into the nitty gritty and understanding the business and coming up with those strategies. I'm sure Ian's got a lot to add there.
I mean, I was going to just add as well, Maurice. I mean, we've got a couple of partners who assist in that space, and certainly what we're seeing more and more of is that the COBRA partners are working together on cases. So, where we require advertising or brand and marketing strategy work to be done, there are specialists in our ecosystem that deal with those things that Ian and Peter can draw on in part of a business rescue or a business turnaround. They can draw on the expertise of those partner organizations and get their input into what is happening, and that's been successful so far. So if you have a look at our partners page, you can get a sense of the types of organizations that are COBRA partners. I think critically, as Maurice said, it really isn't just limited to financial and legal and business rescue. It is more than that. So if there's anything that does require assistance, reach out, and really what COBRA's job is to connect you to the right partner. We have, as I said at the beginning, almost 80 partners, and our job is to connect you to the right partner who's going to be best placed to assist you, and our partners work together to provide assistance.
Thanks, Bob. I see somebody said something about business coaching, and we certainly do a lot of business coaching inherently in what we do, but it's so much more than business coaching. It's almost like leading by example. Sorry.
Very excited. Do the dogs come with the package, Ian? That's what I want to know.
Maybe I'll just pick up there while Ian sorts out these dogs. One of the things that Maurice was touching on, that sole proprietors, if they've got money owing on a personal credit card, etc., it's still for their own account. But an important thing to remember is, as the owners of a business, either shareholders or directors, if you've signed personal surety, that's one of the first questions that we'll always ask you, because if you've got personal surety and it's signed over to the bank or to any other creditor, then that falls outside of business rescue, and the banks can still pursue you as an individual. So we often, in the rescue, put in a clause that allows the banks to be paid over a period of time and relieving that personal surety signed, because there's no point in trying to turn a business around when the owner's terrified because he's about to lose his house or home. So we do work broadly, but just remember, personal sureties aren't protected under business rescue.
On personal sureties, if you're going to pay in terms of personal surety, you've got to speak to us, because it makes more sense for you to pay the business, to lend the money to the business under rescue, so that you get the post-commencement finance benefits. You'll get paid back eventually, and then you pay the creditor. So the little nuances like that that actually require you to actually obtain advice every step of the way. So just bear that in mind, that the littlest of things could actually turn out to be massive.
I see Emily asked about new partners and shareholders. It's one of the things we do. I mean, Bob's covered the 80 partners, bearing in mind our partners are from Microsoft down to some of the smaller marketing and advertising agencies and small accountancy firms. So it is a broad church of support. And in that is, of course, a network of people looking for opportunities as well. So, you know, if you're looking for new shareholders, come into the ecosystem, log your requirements. And if a funder can't join you for funding, they might know somebody that's interested in taking shares, or a like-minded organization. We are in touch with a couple of the funds that are specifically geared towards tourism. They're not making huge investments at the moment, and they're tending to stick to the upper end. So, you know, we have one example of a guy in the tourist industry that had a really good year last year, but he's into the sort of, you know, those 50 to 100,000 Rand a day type packages for European tourists when they can come in. Those companies are still doing fairly well. We do believe there's going to be a flood into that sector as soon as the market opens up, or the borders open up, most importantly. But, you know, finding new shareholders or potential equity providers rather than just debt providers is also something that we do.
There's a question here, and I'm glad it's asked because it relates to landlords. Does COBRA assist in renegotiating leases with landlords? Well, that's actually, it's probably the primary function of COBRA, or what the primary activity of COBRA has been precisely that. Sitting down and negotiating variable leases with the likes of Liberty. So what COBRA has successfully done for quite a few businesses is sit down with the landlord and link the turnover to the rental, or the rental to the turnover. So it's been 100% turnover based rental for a period of time. And we did that last year, and now it's coming up again. No one expected, well, back then they didn't expect the second wave. So now we're renegotiating those older ones once again. So yes.
And it's very, sorry, Maurice, I know we're running out of time, but it's very important to know that we've dealt with a huge number of landlords, and, you know, of various different sizes, from, you know, small landlords with small businesses with small landlords to large businesses with large landlords. And we've got a very, very good feel for how negotiable those landlords are. And that's very important, because it's very important to go into those negotiations having a good feel for where they would be prepared to negotiate to, and what they would be prepared to accept. Because remember, landlords are in a very, very tough, precarious position at the moment as well. So often it's a case of making them an offer which they know that if they don't accept the offer, they'll get nothing whatsoever, because the company will liquidate.
Great, I think that's a wrap.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. If I could give you all a little red hat, red outfit, and a Father Christmas beard, I would. I think you all deserve it. I'm sitting here and just thinking, it's too good to be true. Like, we had the most horrific year as tourism, and just to have people of your expertise, of your caliber, of your care leaning in and nice. Not quite what I was thinking, but we'll get there. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and everyone on the session. Spread the word. I know you will do that. I'm very good at amplifying what we give you. We will send the recording out and all of the wonderful links that Bob pasted in the chat as well. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. I very much look forward to our journey together, and happy Christmas.
Thank you so much.
Please reach out, guys. Feel free to.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Natalia.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.